Welcome to Neural Nexus Podcast, where we explore the hottest topics shaping the world. Let's dive in.
All right, buckle up for this one because today we're diving deep into Robert Eggers' 2024 Nosferatu.
Oh, spooky. Our remake.
Remake is right, yeah. Got our trusty Wikipedia page, plus a pretty insightful review to guide us.
Sounds like a solid starting point.
Yeah, and honestly, can you even talk Nosferatu without the whole legacy thing? I mean, 1922, silent film.
Oh, yeah, the unauthorized one.
Unauthorized, totally. And then we've got Herzog in 79.
And now Eggers. Each generation adding its own twist.
Wait, so they were already dodging copyright back in the 20s, changing names, details, the whole shebang. Bold move. Dracula was already iconic back then.
Speaks to how strong that vampire myth is. But Eggers, though, he's not just rehashing, he dug deep into the lore.
Yeah, the guy's research is intense. Vampires, but not the usual stuff, right?
Like looking beyond those classic tropes.
He was all about historical accuracy, I read. Vlad the Impaler.
Vlad the Impaler, wow.
Yeah, and then, like, old school hysteria, even. Silent film classic, The Phantom Carriage.
Wow, so many different influences all coming together.
He wanted to get away from the cliches, you know?
Makes sense. I mean, how many times can you tell the same vampire story?
Exactly. And it all adds this, I don't know, a depth, a different atmosphere.
Totally. It's like he's grounding the supernatural in something real, something historical.
And the casting is wild, too. Think about it. Harry Styles was almost Dracula.
No way.
Almost.
Uh-huh.
Wild. Right.
Totally different vibe.
Totally. But Eggers ended up with a killer cast. Skarsgård. Bill Skarsgård as Count Orlok.
Now that's inspired casting.
Intense.
Intense is an understatement. The guy went all in. Weight loss, voice training, hours in prosthetics.
He talked about it, I think. Something about conjuring pure evil.
Yeah, I read that too. Said it was hard to shake off the character.
You can feel that in his performance, this like rotting skeletal presence. And the other actors felt it too. Nicholas Hoult, right? He plays Thomas Hutter.
Right.
Said those scenes with the wolves, he was genuinely scared.
Wow.
Skarsgård's dedication shows. And then there's Lily Rose Depp as Ellen.
Oh, yeah, her too.
The review compared her to the idol role, you know?
Right.
Like maybe she's getting typecast a bit.
Interesting. That whole object of fascination, that idea of control.
Exactly. And that plays into this whole sexual manipulation thing the film explores.
Which, to be honest, is pretty relevant right now.
Right. Power, desire, fear, all tangled up.
Yeah.
I think Eggers is making us question our own reactions. Like, is Dracula purely evil?
Yeah.
Or is there something seductive about him?
Definitely makes you think.
Yeah. It's like he makes you feel uncomfortable, but on purpose.
I see what you mean.
So the story, right, we've got Thomas Hutter going to Transylvania, meeting Orlok for this real estate deal. It's clearly shady.
Classic setup.
Classic. Orlok sees Ellen and boom, wants her. And then you've got, like, the plague spreading.
Gotta have the prey.
And everyone trying to stop
We'll
Orlok.
fight for Ellen's soul, all that.
But Eggers, he adds these layers, right? The history, the psychology. He makes it new.
Makes you see the familiar in a whole new light.
Totally. There's this scene, it's on the wiki page, where Thomas sees these villagers, Romani villagers. They're like desecrating a vampire's corpse.
Whoa.
Gruesome. But it sets the stage, you know, the fear of the undead, the superstition, all that.
Yeah, like you're right there with them, feeling the fear.
And that atmosphere, it carries through the whole film, but it's shot in color. Did you know that?
In color. Interesting.
But still, that Gothic feel.
How'd they pull that off?
The cinematographer, Joran Blasky, he talked about being inspired by, get this, 19th century romanticism.
Those old paintings, all dramatic.
Exactly. And then they used practical effects. Tons of them.
Like what?
Imagine being on set with, like, thousands of trained rats.
Thousands. Oh, God.
Yeah. And the score, too. It's done by Robin Carolyn.
Didn't he do like some experimental electronic stuff?
Yeah. And he deliberately avoids those typical horror movie cues. It's more like melancholic,
Yeah.
tragic.
Underscoring the emotion of the story, I bet.
It really adds to that unsettling feeling. So we've got this classic vampire story, but Eggers does it his way. Visually stunning, psychologically complex.
Definitely sounds like he's achieved something special, elevating it beyond just a typical horror film.
And the critics seem to agree.
Oh, yeah.
Glowing reviews.
What are they saying?
Everything from the direction to the acting, the whole package.
Impressive. Remakes are tough. Not easy to bring something new to a story that everyone knows.
Totally. And this review, it actually compares Eggers' Nosferatu to, like, Herzog's version from '79, and even Coppola's Dracula.
Coppola, that was 92, right?
Yeah. And they both came out during, like, times of big societal anxiety,
Interesting.
'79, you had the Cold War. Coppola's, that was during the whole AIDS crisis.
And both films kind of reflected those anxieties.
Exactly. So the question is, what does Eggers' Nosferatu reflect about our time?
Good question. I mean, we've got the strongman archetype, that sexual manipulation theme.
Power, desire, it's all very relevant.
Definitely. Eggers didn't just stumble into this, right?
No, he's deliberate.
Makes you think.
Yeah. About our world, what scares us.
The things we don't want to look at.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this film so interesting, so disturbing. But hey, we've covered a lot. Maybe it's time to, like, take a breather.
Catch our breath, yeah.
Back again with Nosferatu.
Before, we were talking about how this film, it's like, it reflects our anxieties, right?
Yeah, it's definitely more than just a monster movie. It's got layers.
Totally. And that feeling of dread, how Eggers builds it, it's like it seeps into you.
Oh, yeah, the review mentioned that. It's not those in-your-face scares.
No, it's subtle. Creeps up on you.
And the visuals play a huge part in that, I think. Remember we were talking about how they shot it in color?
Yeah, but with that Gothic vibe.
It's weird, right? How do you do that?
Well, the cinematographer, Jaron Blaschke, he said he was inspired by 19th century romanticism.
Like paintings and stuff?
Exactly. You know, those dramatic landscapes, the shadows, the light. It sounds like he used that same kind of style. So it's like color, but used in a way that almost feels black and white.
Yeah, almost. Highlighting those contrasts, that unease.
And then on top of that, you have those practical effects.
Oh, yeah. All those rats. Can you even imagine?
Dozens of them, right? It must have been.
Chaos. Controlled chaos, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
But it adds to that realism.
Which makes it even more unsettling. But hey, we have to talk about Skarsgård's performance as Orlok.
Oh, yeah, that was something else.
The review used words like hideous, oozing, rotted.
Yeah, he really went there. And it ties into what we were saying about that strongman archetype, right? That figure who attracts followers despite being, well, kind of terrible.
And it's something we see a lot these days, sadly. That allure of power, no matter how ugly it gets.
But do you think everyone will find him alluring? Or will some people just be, like, straight up repulsed?
I don't know. That's what makes it so interesting, right? Eggers is forcing us to confront our own reactions.
To power, to darkness. It's like, what are we drawn to?
And the reviewer said something that really stuck with me. They said the scariest thing about this Dracula, it wasn't the fangs or the blood or any of that. It was, hold on, I wrote it down, greater than any of that totalizing power.
What does that even mean?
I think it's about the psychological manipulation. The reviewer even admitted to feeling some, like, twisted sympathy for the people Orlok was manipulating.
Like seduced by him almost.
Yeah, and that's what's truly scary. It's insidious. How it gets into your mind, warps your perception.
It makes you wonder if Eggers is kind of implicating the audience.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, we're watching this unfold, right? This
Yeah.
manipulation, the power dynamics, the whole thing. And then there's that sexual manipulation element, too.
Yeah, he's definitely playing with those themes.
Exactly. It's like, are we complicit just by watching?
He's not giving us any easy answers, that's for sure. It's a lot to think about.
It is. But even with all the darkness and dread, the review also mentions these moments of unsettling beauty.
Oh, yeah, that's the other side of it. Where do you see that coming through?
Well, the cinematography, for one. Even in the most grotesque scenes, there's this artistry.
How Blaschke uses light and shadow, the way he frames the shots.
It's like this beautiful and disturbing at the same time.
And then you have the score, that melancholic, tragic sound. Not your typical horror movie music.
No, it adds to that complexity, that emotional depth.
It reminds us that this is more than just a monster movie.
Right. There's tragedy, loss, that longing, and then there's the acting. The whole cast is amazing, but Skarsgård,
He really disappears into the role.
he becomes Orlok.
Mm.
It's chilling. But are there any specific scenes that, like, really stuck with you?
You know, I keep going back to that scene where Thomas sees the villagers desecrating the vampire's corpse.
Oh, yeah, that one was intense.
So visceral, right. It shows you how fear can push people to do terrible things.
And how easily that line between fear and cruelty can get blurred.
Exactly. It makes you think about how much of our own behavior, even today, is driven by fear.
Another one that got to me was that scene where Ellen first sees Orlok. Not in person, but in her dreams.
Oh, yeah, before they even meet face to face.
It's like he's already infiltrating her mind.
Without her even knowing it. And then, of course, the ending. That final scene, the reviewer called it tragic and strangely beautiful.
That shot of Ellen and Orlok locked in that embrace. It stays with you.
And it raises so many questions, like, is Orlok really gone, or is there still a part of him lingering?
We don't really get a clear answer, do we?
No. It's open to interpretation.
Which is kind of brilliant, makes you think. And that's what Eggers does so well, right?
He makes you question, makes you uncomfortable, and ultimately makes you feel something.
And that's the mark of a great film, I think.
Yeah.
But hey, before we get too philosophical, maybe we should take a little pause. Catch our breath before the final act of our Nosferatu deep dive.
And we're back, wrapping up our Nosferatu deep dive. Last we left off, we were talking about those lingering images, those scenes that stick with you. Oh yeah, Eggers definitely knows how to get under your skin. But before we go, we gotta talk awards buzz. This film, it's making waves.
Critics are loving it. We mentioned a couple of awards, but it's way more than that, like the Astra Film and Creative Arts Awards, Best Horror or Thriller Feature, Best Cinematography, Costume Design.
They're even recognizing the makeup and hairstyling. Skarsgård especially, he's getting a lot of attention.
Deservedly so, right? Astra Awards, Best Performance in a Horror or Thriller, he's up for that. And Lily Rose Depp, Satellite Awards, Best Actress in a Motion Picture Drama.
It's great to see that recognition, but ultimately what matters is how the film resonates with people, those unforgettable moments.
Speaking of which, anything else that stood out to you? Any other scenes that just, like, grab you?
You know, I keep thinking about that scene with the villagers, the desecration of the vampire corpse, just like the raw fear driving them.
Superstition at its most.
Yeah.
Extreme.
And it makes you think, right? How much of what we do, even today, is out of fear?
Fear disguised as something else. Tradition, maybe. Or protection. It's a fine line.
It is. And that scene where Ellen first sees Orlok, but it's in her dream. Subtle, but so effective.
Like he's already got a hold on her, but she doesn't even know it.
Psychological manipulation at its creepiest.
Yeah.
And then that ending, it's just...
Haunting. Tragic.
Hmm.
Beautiful, in a way.
Ellen sacrificing herself, that final shot of them, it makes you wonder.
Is it really a victory? Or is there still a part of Orlok?
Lingering. Haunting her, even in death. It's a metaphor, I think, for the whole film.
We think we've conquered our demons, but...
There's still that pull, that fascination.
So, to our listeners,
Yeah.
as you watch Eggers' Nosferatu, remember, it's not just about scares. It's a journey into desire, power. That timeless Dracula myth. It'll stay with you, make you think, maybe even keep you up at night.
Eggers wants us to confront the darkness in ourselves, in the world. So ask yourself, what does this version of Nosferatu say about us? About our fears, our desires in this crazy 21st century?
Until next time, deep divers. Happy viewing. And remember, sometimes the scariest monsters, well, they're the ones we find inside.